Oregon's two latest transfers. What are they getting in Derrick Harmon and Peyton Woodyard? And will that translate to recruiting success? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. We've got Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, with me here today, brought to you as always by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Let's start with Derrick Harmon, Brian. This is a guy who figures to slot in as Oregon's starting interior defensive lineman alongside the Houston transfer, Jamari Caldwell. What do you see from him?
Massive, 300-pounder that can take up a double team and allow his players around him to make plays. More of a interior run stuffer. He only had one sack, but he had over 20 pressures. He's a guy that at least moves the pocket. That's also important. But again, more than anything else, he can play as a two-gap player in a 4-3 or 3-4. And if you don't account for him with two guys, you can risk your quarterback being mangled. So that helps everybody around him. The most important thing he does is not allow his other guys around him to get doubled.
Yeah, he comes in from Michigan State where he's been a starter for the last couple of years. He does have a redshirt year in there. He's a redshirt junior this season, and I've wondered about whether he would come back to Oregon for the 2025 season as well. He feels to me, Brian, like a guy that does have NFL traits and is NFL capable. Is that your impression as well?
Yes and no. I mean, you can't teach the size, and he's a good run stuffer, but the NFL needs you to get to the quarterback. This is an important year for him to take another step forward and find a way to hit the QB. If he can do that, then he's gone. Because as a run stuffer, he's exactly what you're looking for. 6'3", 6'4", 310, 320 pounds, whatever. That's perfect. But you got to hit the quarterback once in a while, especially if you want to go in the first 3 rounds. Back half of the draft, somebody would still take him. But I'm sure he wants first 3 rounds, at the very least.
Yeah, and playing on a Big Ten title and national title contender at Oregon, that never hurts your draft stock as well. But he was, at the time, the highest rated 24/7 sports defensive lineman in the transfer portal. He was one of the highest rated players in the portal at the time of him leaving it and deciding to come to the Ducks. What was your reaction when you saw that Oregon got him? Was it, oh, that's a nice pickup, or wow, can't believe they got him out of that group? Like, how did it land for you?
Well, I didn't know Oregon was a serious contender. I don't know if that was Dan Lanning trolling somebody. I've read a few things about that, and I'm like, I don't really care about that stuff. I care about wins and losses, and I know you and I have discussed numerous times how they've got several guys coming back from a young group. This is a nice bridge. You don't want all sophomores and juniors being your guy. To have a senior kind of guy or a guy that started a couple of years, whatever you want to say, that's important. And they also got him next to the Houston transfer. So those younger players are going to have to still fight for reps, but they're not forced into it either. I think that's more important. So I wasn't shocked because Oregon, I think they covet D linemen more than any school in the country the way Dan recruits. So I wasn't shocked in that regard. But
The other piece of news that came down in the spring transfer portal window for the Ducks, there were a couple of departures, but Peyton Woodyard, the safety from Alabama, the sort of safety. Why don't we answer that question first? Do you look at those guys and think of them as transfers? Because he counts towards Oregon's transfer portal class ranking, not their recruiting class ranking. But do you see a guy like Woodyard in that way?
The NCAA has to do it for their own political reasons because he enrolled as a student at the University of Alabama. We look at it through a football-only lens. Did he play in a game for the Tide? No. So I don't consider him a transfer. But whatever, he's a kid that should still technically be in high school right now. So I look at it like it's a high school recruit. And he was a top player at St. John Bosco, which is a program that Oregon covets recruits from. So I'm going with the high school player. Take it however you want.
Yeah, and certainly a talented true freshman, but I think it is important to lay out that distinction because typically you don't think of true freshmen as being expected to make an impact right away. But Woodyard comes in at a position group that doesn't have a ton of depth compared to some other ones on Oregon's roster, particularly the cornerback room. Though Max Torres yesterday on the show mentioned that he'd heard Solomon Davis had made the switch from corner to safety, which certainly could make some sense on the back end of Oregon's defense there. But when you look at Peyton Woodyard, who will be a true freshman this fall, is he someone who you think is ready to play?
Physically, he's very unique because he's 6'1", 6'2", 200 pounds, can really play downhill. I don't like him in pure coverage situations. I know we've talked about this before, but in the box, blitzing, doing anything underneath, yeah, he could. St. John Bosco is one of the rare programs where it's good enough in the coaching department. The kids are picking up some college kind of schemes, and that kid plays with no fear either. Like he comes down and lays the wood. So they could find a role for him. I don't really want him in 3rd and 9 situations being the free safety, but Lanning and his staff know that. They'll put him in a spot to be successful. Closer to the line where if he's covering a tight end or something that's cool, well, more likely they're going to have him blitzing or replacing a linebacker that's blitzing. He'll be fine if he gets a lot of playing time.
Well, that's what makes it a little bit curious because I look at this Oregon safety room. I think they have more guys that are better playing down around the line of scrimmage. You think of Brandon Johnson, who hasn't arrived yet, but he's coming over from Duke. He's a nickelback, like a pure nickelback. That's his position. He's not a safety or corner that can pop down to that spot. That's just where he plays. You look at Tysheem Johnson, has not thrived in over-the-top coverage situations over the last couple of years, does a lot of great things from the first down yard marker and in, kind of within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage there. So do you think that Woodyard is someone who can develop those sorts of over-the-top skills? Because that's something that isn't just missing from this Oregon team, but I think after this year, it's going to be another need for Oregon to look at in the offseason.
It's possible. His role with St. John Bosco was kill everything that came in his path, basically. I mean, they, as a program, that's what they've done. So they played a lot of aggressive defense. That's schematic. So I don't really know what he's capable of in the back end. And until I see it, I just figure it's a weakness. But they were downhill. And they just massacred most teams. So I think athletically he can. Now, does he process that way? Some guys see play action and they automatically think run no matter what. Those are the guys that you never want at free safety because they get beat over the top. I don't know if he is that guy. But there are other guys that can move from corner. There are a couple other safeties are going to have to stay healthy that are better at it because I don't think Woodyard, that's as a freshman especially, is going to be there. Maybe into sophomore, junior year is more likely.
Yeah, I think it's asking a lot of a true freshman to make that sort of an impact on a defense that are really important and also kind of scheme-heavy position. You see, defensive backs talking on defense really as much as anybody, frankly, because of, hey, if they show us this look, we're switching to this coverage, and you take the inside guy or you take the second guy in a stat. Like there are a lot of things to pick up that are certainly more complex than what he was going through back in high school. But putting a bow on Woodyard here, Brian, he was a Georgia commit. He flipped to Bama, and then Saban retires, and if that doesn't happen, he's probably never showing up with the Ducks anyway. But what does it say about where Oregon is at on the high school recruiting trail that they were the school to go out and land him?
I think it's a great sign because, once again, they're getting a key LA player, an elite recruit that was coveted by arguably the top 2 programs in college football, and they did it when everybody else wanted him to. He could have went to Michigan or Texas. I'm sure there were plenty of other takers. This is a top 150 kid conservatively in the last recruiting class. So, yeah, I think it's a big sign for Oregon overall that they're one of the top dogs in college football.
Well, we're not done talking about safeties just yet because we need Brian's thoughts on Aaron Flowers and what sort of role he could play in the Ducks secondary this year. First, let's talk about our friends at Yahoo Finance. So, for more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, Brian, so I asked that question about Woodyard and his ability to play over the top because as I look at Oregon's safety rotation, there is going to be either a redshirt or a true freshman that is a part of Oregon's safety room. That could be Tyler Turner, a 4-star from the 2023 class. It could be true freshman Aaron Flowers. It could be Peyton Woodyard. We don't really know right now, but you can't go through a safety too deep in this Oregon room and not have a true freshman in the mix, barring, other position changes out there. So Aaron Flowers was a guy who really stood out to me during Oregon spring game, and I know he stood out to you as well. And, the thing that really jumped off the tape to me was he's just ready to hit dudes. Like, he's so physically ready to play high-level college football. My question that I want you to answer is, can he be a guy that's a little bit rangier, that plays over the top? Because I think Kobe Savage is probably your starting field safety that has to be a little bit more cover-centric and rangy out there. Can Aaron Flowers be that sort of guy?
He's not like a 6'3.5" guy or anything like that. However, his speed to the ball, especially sideline to sideline, is tremendous when he's at free safety, and he recognizes really, really well. I'm not saying it's the easiest position in the world for a freshman to play, but he has the physical tools to do it, and he seems instinctual. Now, against USC, Michigan, Wisconsin, some teams, whoever they end up playing throughout the season and or the Pac-12, there'd be some games they'd probably want to play him less. Like USC, playing against them for a freshman DB is probably not much fun. But I'd say 8 out of the 12 games at least, they could play him a lot of reps. That kid's got speed, physically inclined to do all the things you need, and he's got great hands. Drives me nuts when DBs drop easy picks. He actually catches them. So I think he'll play. And he's at a program that's had some players too. He's a Texas kid. It's life and death down there with football. This is a big pickup for them. I guess maybe I'm wrong here from reading you. This might be their weakest spot in terms of depth on the roster. You could at least make the argument it's in that discussion.
Yeah, I think that and linebacker are the only spots where I can say you've got some too deep concerns. I don't have as many concerns at the top of the depth chart. I think a better cover or rangy safety might be beneficial to Oregon in addition to Kobe Savage from Kansas State. But, at the linebacker spot, I think I feel a little bit more solid. You got Jeff Bossa and Justin Jacobs, who are good players. But then you've got Devin Jackson, who the coaches have been raving about. I don't know if Bryce Betcher is going to keep playing football. He's such a good baseball player. He might be off to the majors, getting drafted after this year. But, yeah, I think there can be an opportunity for a guy like Flowers to step in and, have a role. And it was, I think the second play of the game, Gabriel hit Tez Johnson for a slant and Flowers came downhill and just kind of blew him up. And I was like, whoa, that's what a redshirt sophomore who's had a couple of years in the weight room looks like in the spring game. And this guy is a true freshman. But speaking of true freshman, Nasir Wyatt is not that yet. He will be in 2025. He is the latest 2025 commitment for the Ducks. And look, I watch film. You're better at it than I am, Brian, of course. That's why we bring you on the show. But am I crazy for thinking that this guy, amongst the current Oregon commits in 2025, has got the most impressive tape? Because he is a violent football player and a ferocious athlete. That's what he looks like to me. He's listed as a linebacker. He can play that edge spot. We'll get into that. But like your early impressions of just watching him play football.
He's a guy that if he wasn't playing football would probably be getting in trouble. That's why the game of football was originally brought about, for young men to stay out of trouble. This is a guy that has to hit something. You're right. He's a violent downhill player. Very good first step, spin move. He chases everything down, plays hard on every down, and he played at Mater Dei. So, that kind of helps, and he's still there to my knowledge. I don't see anything negative about it. The only question is how many spots can he play? A school like Mater Dei is so good. Kids usually learn, a little bit of special teams and they have a spot. If you're at one of these random schools like where I live in the Deep South, he's playing punter, quarterback, defensive, all this. So I don't know what else he could do instinctually, but he finds the football as a rush in, and sometimes he loops around, but he'll make a play from the backside. Yeah, I think he's as talented as anybody in their class, and you could make the argument that he's as talented an outside edge guy as there is in the class of 25 in general. So, yeah, this is a kid who'll play early before you get to that show in like 6 months and ask me that. I'll go ahead and answer it now. He will play early at Oregon.
I might ask you again in 6 months anyway, and that'll be for a later time. But he looks like someone who, runs like something's trying to get out of him. Like there's a play on his film where the play actually goes away from where he is, but he just drives this poor kid who's not going to sniff college football, 20 yards behind the play, and pile drives him. And he looks like when that ball is snapped. Tosh Lupoi, Oregon's defensive coordinator, and Tony Tuioti, defensive line coach, they both do a great job. But Lupoi has spoken before about, I think he called it like 6 seconds of violence or 6 seconds of like a full go. Like once the ball is snapped, you give it every single second that you have. And Wyatt looks like a guy who just fits that bill so perfectly because he comes off. I mean, to me, his speed jumps off. And I am not being hyperbolic here when I say it's the most impressive film that I have seen since Justin Flo. Now, Justin Flo, of course, didn't work out because of injuries at Oregon, but I just can't remember, Brian, seeing a guy, even a Mateo or Elijah Rushing or Tatum Tuioti, any of these guys. I can't remember seeing anyone that has the speed he has coming off of that edge spot. That's what stands out to me.
I don't disagree. I think that those guys you mentioned are a little bit different builds, like, Mateo, et cetera. They're a little longer, a little heavier, but the twitch, man. There's something about that when you're a quarterback. It's third and something you don't want. Everybody knows it's probably a pass. They have to know where guys like this are. It changes your pass protections or your running risk of getting smoked. And it also changes how the defense can cover. There's a reason the NFL covets pass rushers towards the top of the draft. That sequence falls to college and the high school level as well. This kid is somebody, even at the high school level, and Mater Dei's got players all over the place, the opponent has to scheme against. When he was one-on-one with a high school player, it did not end up well for the high school player.
Not fair. Not like that. That was just not a fair fight. I think you could see those plays because guys literally had no chance to just match his speed and power. Now, 24/7 Sports has him listed as a linebacker, and he plays that, kind of stand-up edge, Deion Jordan type role, but, he very much resembles position-wise what Mateo and Purchase and Tuioti play and what Elijah Rushing will play. Is he someone that could play at the second level, or is he best suited as an edge guy in that kind of jack linebacker position?
I think you let the guy do what he does as a freshman, and depending on how they want to do it, because there's so many concepts with this, the 3-3-5, the stack, etc. As he learns more and he's more comfortable, you can move him to linebacker, and then everything becomes open. Do you blitz him? Do you use stunts with him? Drop him? I think dropping guys like that into coverage is kind of against my own thought process, but some coaches do it. I'm not saying that he won't be one of them, but I still think 80% or more, he should be moving towards the line of scrimmage, trying to penetrate and make plays off the edge. I hope that's what Oregon does with him, but sometimes coaches get cute.
He reminds me a little bit of Harold Perkins at LSU. I think he is best suited to play on the edge, but some coach could talk himself into, hey, let's move him back to linebacker. Is that where he's best suited? Yeah. No, the Harold Perkins move was not well received. And I've literally run into LSU fans who, when I just kind of talk to them, about football, that's like one of the first things that comes up from last year.
Anger, like Will Robinson.
And by the way, completely justified, because you're like, this guy was the most dominant defensive lineman in college football, and we neutralized them ourselves. Like what were we doing? By the way, given your mindset, correctly so, on have your best pass rushers go after the quarterback. Don't watch a whole lot of 2021 Oregon defense and how many times they dropped Kayvon Thibodeau off the end of the line of scrimmage. Made some Oregon fans a little crazy. I don't think it was as bad as what happened with Perkins, but anytime I watched him drop into coverage, I was like, you just gave the offense a break. You just said you don't need to double team anybody. You don't have to worry about a one-on-one or anything of the sort. So we are aligned right there. But still more to come from Brian. Jonah Williams, Linkon, Cure, Michael Fasusi, all names Oregon fans have to know for 2025. You've got to know about FanDuel, and if you don't buy now, well, now you do. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Plus, you can bet everything you want about the Ducks or college football writ large. You can bet win totals, national title odds, Heisman odds, individual games are even available to wager. It's all over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. All right, Brian, let's get to the names that are on Oregon's radar for 2025, but still have, a ways to go. Let's start with Jonah Williams. We talked a lot about safeties on this pod. 5-star guy in the class of 2025. What's the latest that you've heard?
Well, I mean, they're in the opportunity mode. I think they're going to have a chance with the visit. Like I've said many times, Oregon is the hardest team to figure out with these kind of kids. They're far from home, but they have maybe the best recruiting visit in college football based on all the kids that I know. I mean, like Fasusi and these guys, they, how many of them even know where Oregon's at on a map? You know what I mean? Like it's like the Florida kids don't know where anything's on a map.
And by the way, anyone who would harp on that, like, how could you not know where Oregon is on a map?
Oh, no,
can you put all 50 states on a map? Because I got to tell you, that is a lot harder than you think.
Oregon's should be one of the easier ones, but like literally, especially kids in the South, they live in very small bubbles. I mean, a lot of them don't know their state capital. So to that point, Jonah Williams is a kid that I think is really unique because he's LSU, not surprising, but you have Oregon, Ohio State, etc. I don't know how that's going to play out because they're all the big dogs. And he doesn't give a ton of info. A&M's involved. Oklahoma's predicted, blah, blah, blah. But like Oregon and Ohio State's in it. How do you project with a Houston kid?
That's a good point.
Like, I've done this for a long time. These lists are so broad now. I don't think they have a clue. And I'll talk a little more specifically about this with Fasusi in a minute, but like, these kids are going into these visits like, well, we'll see. I have a lot of off-the-record conversations with kids this past weekend at OT7, and like it's eye-opening when you get the off-the-record info, like the coaches they really like and don't like and all that. But everybody still tells me the same thing. It comes down to the visit. Oregon, in my opinion, conservatively is top 5 on official visits. And if they're going to get a kid like Williams, that's what they got to do. Like we just talked about Flower. When the process started last year, did you think Flowers was going to end up at Oregon? Texas.
Well, I mean, not any more than someone else that Oregon had offered who's a blue chip recruit coming out of the state of Texas. I mean, it's
so random with the visit. Yeah. They have no idea what Oregon's. I don't know what Oregon. I haven't even been there, but
we got to change that. We got to change that.
That's a bucket list opportunity. Don't get me wrong, but these kids don't have a clue. I've seen for over a decade now, Oregon seems to get at least 1 or 2 kids a year out of Texas. If you could explain the reason for that, I would love it. Because when I was first
you got assistant coaches with ties there. Lanning recruited it while he was at Georgia. Tosh Lupoy has recruited every state in the country during his college career. Will Stein is, of course, from UTSA, where he was formerly the offensive coordinator. He's recruited there pretty well. Now you have Rashad Samples in the mix as well, coming up from Arizona State. So I think that's probably the best explanation for it, because you're right. Those 2 states are very far apart. And quite frankly, if we're being honest, they have very few things in common. there
That is
are
the
not a lot of
understatement.
similarities between Oregon and Texas, but if you can get it on the radar, then it all works. But you mentioned Michael Fasusi, so let's pivot there. Pretty much not entirely consensus 5-star, but 5-star caliber player at the offensive tackle position. His recruitment is one that you followed pretty closely.
Yeah, this is a young man from the greater Dallas area. If I remember right, he's at Louisville High School. But here's all you need to know. I walked up to him this weekend, and I see a lot of very large men. When somebody said that's him over there, and I looked, I knew immediately who they were talking about. Like his broad shoulders and everything, like his hands, they're not part of the human race. He is massive. Like he is a huge kid. And he was very blunt. He's got 6 schools: Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M, Oregon, Georgia, and I'm missing one. Oh, Missouri. So he's another kid. Dallas area, I get the Oklahoma stuff. Like Missouri? Oregon?
Yeah, Missouri just had an 11-win season. It's the first time they've done that in like a decade.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And they got a big NIL deal, but like Oklahoma, Texas A&M usually just wipe the slate in that area. And this kid was very open with me. Like he doesn't have his Oregon visit set, and he's trying to figure out the dates. Everybody wants certain dates and all that. And it's a pain for the players to get this stuff set, but he's adamant he will take it. And I sent you that picture. He had a Oregon toboggan on. That was the other reason I knew, because I've been told by somebody that trains this kid, hey, Oregon really wants Fasusi. Okay, well, great. And he was there. He was there with Zaire Addison, ironically. I argue with the top 2 guys on their board at offensive tackle. They're good friends. And I think Oregon is right there. If you'd have told me that before I met him, I'd have said no way. Because Dallas area kids just, when they have like Texas A&M, and Oklahoma all going full in for, and they are, it's really hard to beat those schools for those kids. Fasusi really likes Oregon, though. He just took a visit there. He really liked it. He likes landing and everything. Do not be surprised if he signs with the Ducks.
Let's talk about Linkon Cure, who is at a position that in tight end that is a pretty glaring need for Oregon going into 2025. They did sign a tight end in the 2024 class. Kenyon Sadiq will be going into his true junior season and probably will be Oregon's number 1 tight end next year. But you're losing the top 2 guys on your depth chart, so you have to be able to stack at that position. This is not the first time that Linkon Cure has been tied to Oregon, but it seems like there are always little just kind of bubblings of noise surrounding Cure and the Ducks.
That's a really unique situation. He plays for California Power 7-on-7, but he's from Kansas. So that's another part of this weird equation. He plays on an elite team, but I've seen him, and he's a kid that, while he's 220-ish, give or take, he can really run routes. He can break down, and he can change direction. I think he can play for any school in the country. I haven't interviewed him anytime recently, but that's an athlete that fits today's mold of a tight end that is going to give defenses a matchup problem. Like, I'm sure Oregon will take a transfer tight end this next year. I think that's about as safe a bet as you can get. But this is a kid that still might play. You can't teach the length that he has and his natural ability to move laterally, and he will be a matchup problem. Safety's not big enough. Linebacker's not sticking with him. So he could play early, Oregon, Alabama, anywhere.
Yeah, tight end is one of those positions that I always feel like true freshmen have a chance to come in and make an impact at right away. I mean, we saw that with Sadiq this past year. Terrence Ferguson played his true freshman year. Maliki Monteval, back when he was a Duck before he transferred to UCLA, he played as a true freshman, caught a touchdown in that Ohio State game back in 2021. I think those guys are playing that position because they have the physical traits, because they are ready to play in that spot. And Cure is a guy, look, yeah, it's random being out in Kansas, but Devin Jackson, Oregon's number 3 linebacker right now, is from not Kansas, Nebraska, right? So same part of the country, but if you can get on a kid's radar and you can establish that sort of relationship, and this is one that the Ducks have gone after for a while, so we'll see if Drew Maringer, the tight ends coach, is able to ultimately close the deal. Brian Smith, great stuff as always. He is FB Scout _Florida on X, formerly known as Twitter, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. Brian, thank you as always.
Thank you very much, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.